Ladies and gentlemen, we are in for a real treat tonight here on Sportswire Radio because it's almost like this is your life the last couple of days. Just before we had on Anthony McLean, a guy I watched at Brooklyn College play. Now we have a guy that's been on here when we really were on the training wheels, and he was kind of like, well, why do you want to talk to me? Why do you want to come on? But it all makes sense years later. And of course, this guy he is the best of the best when it comes to calling just a sports game, whether it's at the high school level, the college level, the professional level. This man is really the true definition of a play-by-play man. He is one of the very best that we've ever had here on Sportswire Radio. You know him most notably from John Jay College. He's done some stuff at St. Francis. I won't get into that too much, unfortunately, with their athletics program. But now I think he's got a really cool project he's a part of called Varsity Media, which I really think is going to fill a void for a long time here that's kind of been lacking in the world of high school sports, especially on Long Island and elsewhere. But he needs no further introduction. But because he hasn't been on here in a while, he has to get the introduction that everybody else gets. So, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you with without further ado here on the Sports Report, the number one global sports show, the voice of all sports, Mr. John Perez. John, I hope I didn't scare you there.
No. Thanks for that introduction. I wish I had your pipes and your stamina. So I'm a little jealous on that. Yeah, man. Good to talk to you. Good to chat with you. I'm not a wrestler or a wrestling fan, so I'm sorry if I'm throwing
with Anthony McLean. Anthony McLean was like, in Brooklyn College, I wish we would have had you in Brooklyn. Well, I said, no, that would have been a fun thing. But no, the basketball guys like it too. Brad gets it. We have some of the other guys that come on. We do some stuff with some of the St. Joe's guys, and they eat it up and they think it's funny, but they love it. So, no, we do. Different people like it for different strokes, but I wanted to give it to you, John, because it's been a while. But, John, I really want to talk about, there's a lot of things I could talk about with you, but I really want to talk about this new project, which we've actually plugged here right on the ticker. Since the last time you came on, we've kind of really improved. We've got new lighting, we've got tickers, we've got logos. But I want to talk about Varsity Media because this is really, I think, a project that is going to fill the void, and has already so far, kind of what we were missing here, especially for high school sports on Long Island and elsewhere in the tri-state area. So for those that are listening and watching, John, talk about Varsity Media and kind of what it does here for those that are listening and watching here.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So Varsity Media is the premier high school sports network in New York. We're covering Rochester as well as Long Island and filling that void that MSG Varsity and Verizon Fios, they've just left. We're hoping to really take the island by storm. We offer live streaming and broadcasting as well as game production as well. So there are schools out there that want to have their teams filmed, whether it's boys or girls soccer, basketball, football, what have you. We're able to do that, but we're also able to bring their games to life with our sportscast as well. So we're in the middle of football season in the fall, a lot of exciting things. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I started with them in the fall of 2021. So I feel like I got the vaccine, then I started calling games again, and then that's where I've just been over the last few years. So it's been a lot of fun. I love calling high school sports, and you just never know where these athletes will be. I used to call games for Cole Anthony and Jose Alvarado, now in the NBA, of course. So it's cool to see that progression. KJ Duff at St. Anthony's will probably be playing in the NFL at some time, and Jack Cohn, who was a backup for the Colts, now he's playing in that the bootleg football league. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. We have some exciting things coming up over the next few months and weeks. So yeah, it's been great. I implore everyone out there, if you are an alum or you have a current student athlete who's playing in Nassau or Suffolk County or even Rochester, give us a look on Varsity Media. It's straight up Varsity Media across our social media channels, and we will be the home for the public and private school playoffs in football. And we were talking a little bit about this off the air, but we just acquired the rights this past summer to broadcast the semifinals and finals for all sports in Nassau County. So things are looking up. It's a lot of fun.
I can't wait. I can't wait for that, especially because my buddy, the brute force, Mr. Bradley Weiss, this is going to put so much pressure on him, John, because obviously he's an assistant at Plainview JFK for the boys varsity team. He's the head coach for the junior varsity team. So when I see him on Friday I'm going to certainly get right on his grill. And Brad, our old friend John Perez, you might see him again. If you want to see him again, now you're going to have some real pressure to live up to. I'll get to that at a different time. But, John, I'm really happy that you're doing this here, especially for high school sports. I guess one of the things that throughout the 5 years I'm doing this, I wish I would have done a little bit more. I've done it in very small doses, is high school sports. And the reason that I'm excited for it, because the high school sports scene, especially on Long Island, it's so exciting. You get into these football games, in a way, it's almost like Friday Night Lights. You get these big crowds and people are into it. Soccer is massive on Long Island. And I know it's been a while since you've done these high school games and you kind of just alluded to it, but does that kind of give you a little bit of extra juice knowing you're going into an environment where a lot of people are watching you, 30,000 subscribers almost on YouTube, and, high school sports on Long Island is very special. And talk to me about maybe some of those feelings.
There's nothing better than a Friday night or a Saturday afternoon during football season at one of these high schools, bar none. And they've been the best atmospheres that I've been a part of, especially at the high school level, because it's not just the two teams that are playing. You get parents, loved ones, and their friends. More times than not, we're broadcasting a homecoming game, so everyone's already jazzed up for that. They had the pep rally. The cheerleaders are out. The local PAL programs are out. The noisemakers. We just had a fantastic rivalry game, St. Anthony Chaminade last weekend.
You're talking about that off the air, yep.
Yeah, and that was great because it was probably a 60-40 split of Chaminade to St. Anthony's fans, which was great because the game was at Chaminade. St. Anthony's travels well, so it's good to know that it was loud the entire time. It just, everyone remembers their high school years, and then they also remember a big touchdown they might have scored as a junior. I'm trying to think of like the Al Bundy equivalent there, right? Where what you would know this better, right? Polk High School. He
scored with 3 touchdowns, I think, and he was the high school MVP. Yeah, I remember that very well. Yeah, that old Married.
Yeah, I mean, the thing
children came up on Sportswire. This is the second time in the last week. I think I used Al Bundy for something else, and then here you go. What a small world, John. This is why it's good to have you back.
Yeah, man. And I'm not spoiling anything. Most Long Island high school athletes become Al Bundy.
Brad Rice, I mean, we've kind of joked, has become like Al Bundy.
You're right. So you remember that one big game that you have, and we're able now to capture it on YouTube and across our social media platforms. And now you've got a keepsake forever. We archive all our broadcasts. So something that could happen this Friday could be viewed 5-10 years from now, which is great for student athletes, their parents, and think about like Aunt Pookie or whoever else down south, or someone who's not able to attend the game, but they're able to watch online. So that's the neat part about it.
No, it's really cool, and I want people obviously to follow Varsity Media here on X, as it's now. I'm trying to get used to it being called X, YouTube, Instagram, and varsitymedia.net. And then obviously, when you're in an environment, now I know obviously I've watched you in the CUNY, I've seen you in St. Francis, you've been into some big environments, but I almost feel like though, when you're going into a game, knowing that you're going to have hundreds of people in the stands, you're going to have an electric environment, as a play-by-play guy, does that give you extra motivation? Because I know, listen, it was challenging watching you during COVID with the John Jay games. Nobody's there, and then it's kind of like you're basically trying to tell us the story. Even last season, okay, people were starting to come back, but still that atmosphere is not the same as going to a high school football game on Long Island. Do you feel like personally almost like extra like juice, an extra pep in your step, knowing that this weekend you're going to be calling a game where thousands of people are going to watch it on YouTube eventually and hundreds of people are going to be there? I mean, talk to me about that.
Yeah, you get juiced up for different reasons. There's nothing better than the roar of the crowd. We've got a good one Friday night. Wantagh takes on Southside, Nassau 3 matchup.
Okay.
That both teams are undefeated. Southside hasn't given up a point this year. So that's going to be fun. And Wantagh with aspirations to get to a county and a Long Island championship. Having said that, though, it's great to see the parents file in and the students and the road students come in, which is a lot of fun. There's nothing better when there's a touchdown late in a quarter and the crowd's going nuts leading up to it. Then there's a crescendo, the action happens, and you just try not to mess it up. So that's what I try and do. I try and get out of the way. I'm trying to think of like
call those games, John. Stop. Listen, and you know how much I love John Jay, but calling a John Jay game versus calling a game, let's say at Wanta or St. Anthony's and Chaminade, you know that people are going to remember. You know, John, you forgot how to pronounce that person's name, though. You know, John, you missed who got that play. You know, they're going to remember that. You know, not to say you won't get that at John Jay or elsewhere in the CUNY, but there'll be a certain type of almost person that's going to want to hang on to every word that you say in a game like this.
Well, yeah, and sometimes you hear it during the game. I did baseball playoffs last year where the PA announcer, because we share a press box, said, Tom Brees instead, for example. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Brees came up to the press box to let everyone know that it's Bryce, not Brees, which was very, they'll let you know in the moment. In my case,
people will be like, good, you mispronounced his name. I don't want to hear his name anymore. I'm sick of it.
No, it's something that, I take a lot of pride in. I speak to the coaches ahead of time. I'll give you a little look behind the curtain. Sometimes the coaches don't know their players' last names or how to pronounce their players' names.
I believe that.
Yeah, they just have nicknames.
I believe that. I definitely believe that because I get this all the time in wrestling. There'll be certain people who will like say, well, you should have said it this way or that way, and it happens. So, I mean, I am not surprised you said that, John. Not one bit.
Yeah, no, that happens all the time. But it's great because we'll hear from the parents afterwards, hey, we watch all your stuff. You guys do a great job, and there's no better feeling than that. Now, to be fair to John Jay, I would hear from the John Jay parents, so that was also a lot of fun. But yeah, there's some sort of gratification for these parents who are not expecting the game to be covered live, and then when it is, for us to do the job that we do. So it's very rewarding. It's a lot of fun, and just as a broadcaster, there's no better feeling than when you're, studying for a week, getting ready for a football game, get some sort of validation.
No, definitely does. And obviously what I mean is on a larger scale. You're going on a larger scale because high school sports on Long Island, I've had this conversation numerous times, obviously getting to know a lot of the St. Joe's guys and obviously knowing what recruiting is like on Long Island. And obviously Brad and Jason Gaudieso has become a good friend. So I got the whole sports scene on Long Island, and I think that that's kind of what it is here. And, what are some teams that maybe you're looking forward to calling some games here for the rest of the season? Are there some games or particular, let's say, matchups or even players that you're really looking forward to maybe calling here in these coming weeks?
Sure. So I was excited going into this past weekend for Chaminade St. Anthony's. It's a rivalry game, the two biggest names on Long Island.
I know it from basketball. I mean, from basketball. Right. Absolutely.
And it's always a battle when those two meet, regardless of the sport, which is a lot of fun. Now, Chaminade as a football team, they're a little bit younger. Everyone thought that it would be the massacre in Mineola, and it wasn't the case. Chaminade hung with them. They didn't get the victory, but it's something that they could build upon. And that's the thing about football in the AAA. You just get into the playoffs and you keep, if you just get into the dance, there's an opportunity to win.
Sure.
So that's been fun. I've done a ton of St. Anthony's over the last few years. KJ Duff, he's committed to Rutgers. He's going to be a fantastic wide receiver wherever he plays in the future, or tight end he's listed as, but he's a wide receiver in high school. We got a great one coming up we got two good ones coming up this weekend. We've got Friday night, Southside versus Wantagh. Southside, this group has been together for 3 years now, and they play lacrosse too. That's a cool thing. There's a lot of polymerization.
Lacrosse from Long Island is just massive. One of my buddies was a high school lacrosse player, and lacrosse has just, it's exploded.
Yeah, no, they give you the stick at the maternity ward. Like, that's how it goes over there. So it's a lot of fun. Jack Lazito, Owen West. Sure. Now, those guys are not going to play professionally in football, and that's fine. But they are a lot of fun to watch, and having the chance to see them since they were sophomores now blossom. This is probably their best opportunity to win a Long Island championship, if not a county final. And then in the North Shore Malvern game on Saturday at 3:00 on Varsity Media, we've got Josiah Brown, who's committed to Penn State.
Wow.
So he, by a lot of publications, is listed as the number one wide receiver. KJ Duff, as I mentioned, from St. Anthony's, also listed as the number one. So it depends on what website you're going to. But either way, like, we've had both of them on our network. They're both great guys. And it's going to be a lot of fun to see them. So those are a couple of guys that I'm excited for. What do I have coming up next week? Next week is Monsignor Farrell, so they travel all the way to St. Anthony. So imagine getting to Staten Island,
you get
from
the
Staten
South
Island
Shore
to
of
Huntington.
Staten Island, yeah. So you'll get the Staten Island parents with them that'll travel. Yeah, that'll be an interesting matchup there.
Yeah.
I could definitely see that. Yep.
Yeah, no, I mean we've just got a lot of fun games coming up, and then DJ Lisbon's a great kid from St. John the Baptist. We're gonna have them twice over the next few weeks. Farmingdale Farmingdale Massapequa was a big one.
Oh, I definitely know that matchup. Obviously, from Mr. Brute Force, we definitely know.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's going to be a fun one. And then trying to think who else off the top of my head. We have Oceanside, Syosset, which is very good. A lot of two-sport athletes on both sides. And then we've got Hills West, led by Joe Filardi, who probably will set the regular season passing record if his team goes all the way to the final, which is something that hasn't been done since a few years ago. Jack Cohn did it. Jack Cohn, obviously, playing at Notre Dame.
Yep.
And where else? In Wisconsin. So started at Wisconsin, went to Notre Dame, and then in the NFL for a little bit as a backup, now playing, what is it, the USFL, right?
They're about to merge, actually, now, the USFL and the XFL. I know it was kind of funny with the way you said it, and I was like, well, they're actually going to merge with each other for what that's worth. I mean, they're going to I couldn't watch it this year. I mean, I was saying to myself, I'm going to watch it. And I didn't watch it. I didn't watch the USFL and the XFL. I tried a few years ago before COVID when they had the Alliance Football League, that whole AFL thing.
Right.
And it was like kind of minor league, but obviously Jack is doing some great things and really excited about that. I do hope one day you call a Plainview JFK game. For whatever reason, I really hope that you do call a Plainview JFK game. But we'll definitely get into that, but obviously that's exciting. A lot of exciting stuff there, and obviously we're looking forward to everything related to Varsity Media. And then just going into it here, also I know you guys are doing some soccer also a little bit as well. Like you guys have some soccer coverage also going up.
Yeah, we're gonna have boys and girls championships, AAA all the way down to B, starting at the end of the month, and it's just a crazy marathon that's going to start, I believe, from October 25th or 27th, whatever that weekend is, until the 2nd of November. And we'll have, obviously, the matchups as we get closer, and you could watch that all on Varsity Media. But, yeah, we've had some good soccer players in the past. Hope Breslin comes to mind from Massapequa. She played at UVA. I'm trying to think who else on the boys' side. But always good teams, traditionally good soccer programs. And
Long Island is very big with soccer. I mean, Long Island, again, it's another place that, very similar to, in a way, kind of like with lacrosse, where you go out there and, you start at an early age and you just have those capabilities, and a lot of the coaches there that wound up, they had played D1 or D2, certainly a lot of Malloy coaches, and they go out there, and Long Island, and especially Nassau County, really supported soccer, and you could definitely see a lot of those players come up and play in different places. That's kind of cool, and it's always, because when you have them at the end of October, that's almost like championship week right around that time. So you have all these games kind of go into one. So, I mean, how are you going to keep your voice going, John? You talk to me about my intro. You have to call a 3-hour game. I could just do an intro for a couple minutes and all right, I have a drink, I'm fine. But you have to actually call these games for a few hours and call a bunch of them all at once, because football, like you talked about, it's going to come up toward the end of the season real quick. That'll be like in early November. But before that, you've got soccer, all these marathon games. So how are you going to do it this year and pace yourself?
You just have to embrace it. That's number one. But, you talk to the coaches, you start following teams. Luckily, we're working with a few other guys. Shout out to Rob Anderson, too. He's the head of, or not the head, but he's a huge part. I don't know his exact title, but he's involved with Nassau Soccer. So he knows a lot of these teams and their players. So he's a great resource to tap into, because he knows them like the back of his hand, and he's coached against them, played them, has known their families forever.
Yeah, Rob, I feel like his name has come up somewhere through.
Yeah, he did work for NFHS. I know he's done other Varsity Media in the past, and I'm trying to think where else he's broadcasted. But he was great. I just worked a game with him last Wednesday, Syosset Oceanside at Syosset, and he knew everybody, and it's just so much easier when you've got a partner that loves the sport. And especially for soccer, where there's just a ton of downtime. So he could fill in the gaps and really makes it a lot easier. So the key is talk to the coaches, do your homework, and have a good partner. And that's how I've been able to survive.
Yeah, it's so funny because as we're speaking with Mr. John Perez, John does well. He literally calls almost every sport that they're human is. He'll call badminton, it'll be a great. In fact, he'll call pickleball. Like I'm actually watching pickleball these days, and John would do great at calling pickleball. He is the best at everything. We'll plug his social media in a little while, but there's there are like three food groups of calling games. Football, it's obviously every play, every down. Soccer, it's almost as from calling and obviously seeing you and John Jay. You call the game and there's like a lot of almost kind of like passing the time and kind of just waiting and idling. And then lacrosse is almost kind of like it's like hockey without the skates in a way. So it's kind of a really exciting, exhilarating game, but it's certainly a game. Maybe it's a little more fast paced to call versus football, but they're all three types of great things to call. And obviously we're excited about all of that. And I almost feel like in a way, this was where you should have been, because I know years ago we spoke about MSG varsity and the kind of void that it left. And I feel like this is where you should be. You were always I always felt even from years ago and speaking with you and, the first time you came on and getting to know you that this is where you should be with your voice. I kind of feel like you shine in these elements. I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
I appreciate it. I've been very fortunate to work at MSG Varsity and meet Dylan Butler, who helped build the bridge to get me over to Varsity Media. And then I've just been very fortunate with my bosses, Ben and Jeff Turchin, who have just let me do what I do. And they really don't step in and tell me how to broadcast. And it's been great. And, I'm hoping that I've reflected positively on them, at least for their coverage of the games. And it's been a lot of fun. And yeah, man, it's always been a goal to broadcast games for a living. I'm doing that. I'd be lying if I told you I don't want to move up the ladder in the future, but for where I am right now, yeah, it's a step in the right direction, and I'm having a lot of fun. I feel really energized. I know it's only Monday now, but I can't wait for Friday. Like it's a shame because I'm rushing life, and you should never rush life, but I just can't wait for Friday and Saturdays in the fall. So like that usually throws out 5 days off the calendar right away because
no, but you
I'm
know
just
what
waiting.
though? But I think really, and you think about like high school sports and all, and I've had this conversation with so many people over the past, and it's a nut that I've never been able to crack because I don't live on Long Island and it's hard. I got into different things, different followings with, but high school sports, Brad and I have had this conversation so many times. Yeah, we want to do this. We want to talk about this person and that person, but it's so hard, but you're able to actually get there. And I think that's why you're so excited because Long Island high school sports, it really is, in a way, to me, it's actually bigger than college sports on Long Island in a way, as crazy as that sounds, because this is kind of like the stepping stone where you could go somewhere big, or, you have so many people that are there that are watching as recruits and coaches. I mean, especially like when you get into basketball season, I mean, that's where you're going to see, John, it's going to be like, this is your life then, because you're going to see this coach, school that and that school, and, that's why I kind of feel like in a way you're so excited about it, because there's something special about high school sports on Long Island. I love the city. Obviously, I'm a city guy like you, but you don't have that same presence, that same vibe in the PSAL. You just don't have it. There's a lot of reasons I don't want to get into it on the air, but on Long Island, you have it. I don't want to quite say it's like Friday Night Lights, back on the old TV show, but there's something, and I could see why you're excited into it because it's just exhilarating. To me, it is, in a way, this is like professional sports for some of the people and some of the teams that you're calling. I think that's why you're so excited.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely excited. And the one good thing, too, about Varsity Media is we've worked with, and we will continue to work with, the CHSAA in the city. So that's Christ the King, Cardinal Hayes, St. Francis Prep,
Bavarian, sure.
Right. And those teams, any one of those teams can win the CUNYAC running away, no problem.
Oh, absolutely.
Cardinal Hayes would have ran the floor. They would have ran all over whoever won last. What was it, Baruch? Right? Because they always win. Yeah, they would have made Baruch eat their lunch because they had a player that's going to North Carolina and another player going to Syracuse, and Baruch's best player.
Yeah, don't get me started on last year's CUNY play. Just don't get me started.
Right. Having said that, though, yeah, it's just so much fun because it's that community comes out, they watch, and then everyone else is trying to fill that gap. Slam Magazine isn't really as big as it used to be, at least amongst high school students now. It's everyone's got a blog, everyone's got this, got that. So it used to mean something to have SI or Slam Magazine cover your event, and it still is. But because of all the coverage that everyone's getting now, it really makes these guys like a Boogie Flan seem larger than life. So everyone's going to see them. And not only is everyone going to see Boogie Flan, for example, last year, Stepanak, who won it all, they were in the quarterfinals. Out of nowhere, there's a few college coaches, and then a hushed tone. You look to your right, and John Calipari's walking into the gym at Fordham. You're not going to get that anywhere else.
No. Totally,
especially at the high school level. So that's really cool to see. It's cool to see. It was cool to see Rick Pitino walk into the gym when he was scouting for Iona. Now he's got a pulse on St. John's, and
well, you're happy about that, though. You're very happy about that.
This is the first time, I think. Yeah, this is the first time in my life I've been excited for a St. John's head coach. Like,
yeah, I mean, well, they really haven't been. I mean, Lavin, that 1 year they won the tournament game, maybe two okay years, but they
haven't had sustained success.
No.
And by sustained success, I mean they go on a run where they're in the NCAA tournament.
I mean, in our lifetime, have they really had that run? I'm trying to think about, because Brad and
It'd be Jarvis. It'd be Mike Jarvis.
But we were like what, little kids? I don't even remember really that in our lifetime, right? St. John's, right? St. John's wasn't the Mecca, like in the 80s and the 70s. They haven't been really of any worth. And you said Jarvis, so what, 25 years that was? 25 years ago?
You have no idea how much it makes my skin crawl to watch a St. John's Georgetown game, and all the bump-ins are of Patrick Ewing and Chris Mullen. And yes, they played a huge role in the rivalry. That was 100 years ago.
Right.
I would like to see more recent players.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, I'd like to see a lot more recent players. And I think the rivalry could come back with Ed Cooley and Rick Pitino. It's a coach's league. That'll be a lot of fun. But you need to get to that point. You can't keep harping on 1985. It's not 1985 anymore. In fact, the students who attended St. John's or are going to attend St. John's, their parents probably weren't around in 1985. Or at least didn't know about it.
Listen, 85, I mean, maybe you were just, if you're a parent now, maybe you were just born, maybe you're a few years old. You don't have any recollection. That's my point. St. John's hasn't been like in the top 10. They haven't been in even the top 15. You said Jarvis. All right, so Jarvis is like, what, 25 years ago? I mean, that's how long it's been. Other than that, okay, they've been to the tournament a few times here and there, but they backed into the tournament. I mean, okay, Lavin, they were okay, maybe 1 year, but not to what there should have been. I mean, you had, and that's why I think there's a lot of excitement, and I'm sure, are going to be struggling to get a ticket this year.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch him. I really can't. He had the quote the other day. I think he said if they don't win an NCAA tournament game or win the NCAA tournament, he's going to throw himself in the East River. Like, I love hearing that. I think it's hysterical. I think it's great. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing to see all these polls go out there, and there's a Pitino effect, like what team will surprise you or what team has the best coach. And St. John's is there,
what he's done in college.
5.
I mean, obviously, look, Timmy Clues did, and I know obviously from Coach Matejko, Iona won, but Rick Pitino put them on another level. I mean, everywhere he's gone and done something with. We think about Providence. Who knew Providence, right? Took Providence and took them right to a Final Four. Obviously, you talk about Kentucky. You talk about all that Louisville. I mean, Louisville was down actually before Rick Pitino. So this is kind of what he does. I mean, we're not going to talk about the NBA so much with him, but in terms of college, I mean, this is what he does. And this is really the perfect place for him because he's got history here in this conference. He's a local guy in a way, and he knows how to win here. And it's a program, like you said, you're an alma mater from here that hasn't had really any of much winning. And it's good for New York City because New York City in college basketball, we were so synonymous with it, right? Or New York basketball. And, Syracuse, which has tried to put its foothold in, but they're not really New York City. And, even then, they haven't had success recently. And, Seton Hall is not really New York City. But the point is, in New York City, we really haven't had the flagship team, St. John's, do anything of any sorts. And I think now, hopefully, could be that time.
Yeah, I think so. And then, so my freshman year was that 2010, 2011 season. So Lavin's first year,
right,
where he, they won every game in the Garden, it seemed like, knocking off all top 25 teams. Like, it was insane, the run that they had. The issue was that it was an older team and all of those guys graduated. So it's not like they got to run it back. And because they didn't run it back, nobody built a following. But I was there at the Pittsburgh game, and it was the first time that year that they opened up the top rows and the top concourse at the Garden. And it was all St. John's fans. It was great. It used to be 50-50, Georgetown alums, Villanova alums, UConn. No, it was all St. John's, which is great. Now, it probably had to do with, I don't think there's many Pittsburgh alums that live in New York. I mean, Dexter
There's
Henry's the
actually
only one that I know.
Villanova. I could see Villanova because I actually know people locally that went to Villanova. So Villanova makes sense. But yeah, Pitt wouldn't make sense to me at all.
Right. Yeah. No, it's just my buddy Dexter Henry. That's it.
Well,
Who
Dexter,
went
another
there.
guy. I mean, every time I look on my timeline, Instagram, Dexter's like somewhere big. He's like super big now, Dexter.
I know. Yeah. No, his rise has been insane, and he's always been talented. So I'm really happy for him.
Yeah, great guy. I've spoke to him a couple times off the air. Just a phenomenal talent. Like you
Yeah.
said.
No, he's worked really, really hard. So I'm really happy for him. Brian Fonseca. Those guys, I met them at St. Francis too a million years ago. But yeah, no, they're great guys. I'm glad Dexter's killing it, and I think he just launched a new program. Right, he got game, and New York got game. He's gonna kill me for messing it up, but definitely check him out.
Oh, for sure. No question about that. We'll certainly see what the future of all these great things are. But want people to follow John here. You can check him out on Instagram at It's John Perez. I put Twitter, although it's X still, I guess, depending on whatever you call it. But I put it John Perez _. And if you want to check us out, we're actually on YouTube now. It's Sportswire Radio, and 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You can listen to all of Sportswire Radio's content on sportnarium.com/play. We have a little internet radio station where we play your podcast, your favorite show. If you want to be a DJ, you want to play some music, you want to spin some tunes or talk about anything that's on your mind, we do that for you also. And my name is your voice of all wrestling, the host of the Sports Report, the owner of Sportswire Radio, the Reverend Tom Bryce. And we are here with Mr. John Perez. And John is always doing so many great things, but right now he is doing currently some phenomenal things with Varsity Media. Really something that I think if you're a sports fan, a high school sports fan, you are definitely going to want to love here. And we'll talk more about it again in a little while. But, I got to talk to you about something because you made me chuckle, John, because I go on my Spotify, it opens up for whatever reason, and I see John Talks. I see your podcast, and it made me think, well, the first time you had done that podcast, we were talking about the New York Mets and the frustrations, and yet it feels like things haven't changed because we didn't have you on last year, and the Mets win 101 games, make the playoffs, but yet this year, yet again, for the fifth time in 6 years, the New York Mets are going to be changing managers because it was obviously a very disappointing season. I know you are still glued into what's going on out there in Flushing because Buck Showalter and the New York Mets have parted ways. We have David Stearns, who's the new president and CEO of the team, and we're looking for a new manager. And John, you were certainly, I'm sure, talking about it, maybe not on the air, but certainly off the air. And what do you make of this New York Mets franchise? Because it's here we go again.
Well, a couple of things there. One, a little shame on you. You should have had me on this year. Maybe they would have won 101 games again. And Edwin Diaz would have got
Brad Weiss was like, I don't want to talk about the Mets this year. The Brute Force was like, I don't want to talk about him. We're not talking about him because he got in trouble last year with us.
Right.
Because he was talking about confidence. And he was talking as if like, okay, when we had a 10-game lead against the Braves, it was him and Salicata that jinxed the Mets. I kid you not.
Yeah.
Because the Brute Force says it's over. The Braves are never coming back. We're winning the division. It's going to be our year. Then we look up that last series, second to last series in Atlanta. We get swept despite having Scherzer and I think it was DeGrom was on the mound. And then obviously we lose in the playoffs against San Diego in the 2 out of 3. And then this year it was just like got up to an okay start. But just this team never did much of anything, especially in the month of June once again. And the Brute Force, Brad Weiss, basically put an embargo on me and talking anything related to the New York Mets. So that's hopefully you buy that excuse, John.
Yes, I think that suffices. It's funny. I actually went to the game yesterday. My wife wanted to go, and I was like, all right, we'll go. I didn't go to a game all year. In fact, just throwing it out there, maybe I am the good luck charm because the last game that I went to before that was game 2 of the wild card series last year. So
that was the game with the Saturday night game. Yep.
Right. With the 2-hour 7th inning. I think, listen, they put all their chips into Scherzer and Verlander, 2 older pitchers. If this was 10 years ago, they would have the best rotation in baseball with Scherzer, Verlander, and DeGrom. It just happens. I still think that they're on the upswing. They made the right hires at the time. I think what we're learning now about Buck Showalter is that while he's a very nice guy and he marries the analytics and nobody's going to know more than Buck and over preparing like Buck, his biggest flaw was that, at least if you're reading the Athletic article and the tea leaves, was that he treated everybody like a professional and he expected everyone to do their own
He was a
work
player's
on their own.
manager. He was a player's manager.
Right. But with that said, if you don't have guys that are bought in or are going to get better by themselves and take extra batting practice, do more sprints, basically hold yourself accountable, and a player's manager really doesn't resonate.
Well, look at the Mark Hanna comments a few days ago. Basically, he was talking about certain players, and they just didn't, I guess, put themselves in a position to improve. And obviously, a certain guy was singled out in Jeff McNeil pretty much. That was almost like Jeff McNeil was, there were certain guys obviously in the infield. And, this was kind of a lingering thing. We spoke about it on Sportzwire when we did speak about the Mets, when Brad felt like he wanted to speak about the team. And, it was almost like we would watch them and we'd say, I'd come on the air Friday nights and be like, well, did this team want to show up? And that was, I think, the problem more often than not this year, John.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, I don't know why I felt like this black cloud coming into the season. And I love the World Baseball Classic, and I was watching it. And when Puerto Rico wins, I was hoping that Diaz would blow the save so he can go to spring training and he'll be okay. Because I was worried about his arm. Because if you're gonna have your closer out there, north of 80 times, 70 times, then you can obviously hurt yourself. Sure. I didn't expect his ACL to get blown out. It was just, listen, it was a tough year overall. What I really liked about this year, or at least gives me hope for the future, Steve Cohen pivoted. He didn't. No, think about it. He's pivoting. He's not sticking around with the same guys. He could have easily kept Scherzer and Verlander, make up the old argument of, let's keep these guys in the rotation, sell tickets.
And there's a point even to make, John, because I actually said this to my brother overseas the other day on Facebook, was that, if you would have actually, considering how weak the National League was, you could have theoretically made a case if you kept them both, that maybe you could have even snuck into the playoffs, because 84 wins, won the last two wild cards this year. I mean, you could have theoretically made a case that this team could have probably hung around and they would have probably been right there. They only, even despite everything, they finished 9 games out of the last wild card. That tells you how really bad the National League was this year.
Yeah, no, the National League wasn't great. It's tough, right? It's basically picking your poison here, because you can make the argument, well, if you got Scherzer and Verlander in a 3-game series in the wild card, you like your odds. I mean, I like the odds of Scherzer and DeGrom last year, and that did not work out on Scherzer's case. Which, by the way, Scherzer's never been a good playoff pitcher. He had one good series in 2019. Other than that, he's fallen flat on his face.
About him, with the Tigers and other places, and he just was never.
Well, even Washington, Game 5 against the Cubs, all the talk going into that game was get the ball to Scherzer in the bullpen, get it to Scherzer. They got it to him, and he
exploded. Yeah, he exploded.
The good thing is you hope that these prospects are really good. Acuna's brother looks really good. If not, then you have these high-level prospects that you can leverage for trade chips. I mean, there's something there where they want to build long-term. And Cohen said that he wants to build a farm system. Well, how do you do that? You got to get these aging veterans out. And in with out with the old, in with the new. So I like that they're pivoting. They're not just sitting around.
Yeah, I mean, listen, Tommy Pham wasn't coming back to this team.
Right.
Mark Hanna wasn't coming back to this team. I mean, David Robertson. Okay, if you want to bring him back, I'm not sure if I would, but you could bring him back. So I mean, I think the point is fair that you had guys on this team when the team was underachieving. Well, why keep them? I mean, I understand that point. It's not a terrible point.
No, I would re-sign David Robertson. I was fine with it. The team wasn't clicking or gelling. Unless they were going to give up the farm again, what did you expect for them at the trade deadline? They weren't one piece away. They were multiple pieces away.
Yeah, I agree with you that I never felt that this team, I know they had that great road trip in, I think, the end of April, and they were 14-7, if I recall, but they never really gelled as a team. Offensively, they had challenges. The bullpen certainly had challenges. Scherzer did not really have, until his last couple of starts, a great run. Verlander missed the first, 5 or 6 weeks of the season. We didn't have him right away. I mean, there really was, Carrasco, don't even get me started on him. I mean, Peterson struggled. I mean, they didn't really have, as a team, like you said, they didn't collectively as a whole really gel like they did last year. Last year, you felt like they were going to win. No matter what, they were going to win. They were going to find a way. They were resilient. They were clutch in the big spots. They did something that Met teams have not done historically recently. That's hit with runners in scoring position. The bullpen was near automatic except for a couple of weeks stretch in June last year. They were pretty much, that was them. They were just clutch, and they did all these things. This year, it was like Daniel Vogelbach. I'm sick of seeing him up there. They had kept batting him in the middle of the lineup. I mean, there were just a lot of things with this team that, James McCann, don't even get me started on him. I mean, just, there was a lot of things with this team at the beginning of the year that they just never gelled. They never had it. Never did.
No, they never did. Everything broke right for them last year. And I think Buck probably had his best year managerial wise. He didn't lose any challenges. They had multiple come from behind victories. They really rallied around each other. Yeah, that team clicked on all cylinders, and it was insane to see them just regress in the fashion that they did.
Oh my God, it was like you couldn't. There was a point, I think. I know I said this on the air. I mean, I joked about Brad and the embargo, but I mean, it was honestly like they were pitiful to watch. I would say for at least a month and a half, 2 months, and then go figure the last couple of weeks of the season, I started to watch the team again because it was like, well, I kind of now I'm going to watch these guys, but they really were pitiful. I mean, they were really in New York. I mean, this had to have been the worst New York baseball season in our lifetimes that maybe we've witnessed. I mean, I'm sure that there were ones, in the early 90s when, talk about the Mets and the Yankees, but I mean, this was just pitiful. I know the Yankees finished over 500, but I mean, this baseball season, this summer, John, it was pitiful. It was just pitiful to watch.
I know the records don't help. I'd rather be the Mets than the Yankees right now.
Me too, because the Yankees, you think, well, we missed Judge for 50 games, and Stanton was injured, and Rodon didn't pitch for 3 or 4 months, and, maybe we'll come back and we'll be all right next year.
The Mets don't have an albatross of a contract, and I'd rather give 10 years to Francisco Lindor than 6 years to Carlos Rodon. The Mets have a good farm system. The Yankees are still building it. Dominguez just got hurt. So, and I know he's only 20 years old, but that's a major, it's a major injury, UCL injury, even if you're not a pitcher. And then, who knows what's happening with the Cashman and Boone situation. I'm sure that might have some effect on the players. I don't know. But Aaron Judge usually gets hurt for long periods of time, as does Giancarlo Stanton. They both have injury history.
Oh, my God. Stanton, I mean, this guy, even when he plays, John, I mean, seriously, if my grandfather was alive, he could run better than Giancarlo Stanton when he gets up and actually has to do something. I mean, this guy, it was so many times on X, I guess we'll call it X, it is X, right? I mean, He was basically a meme because he got thrown out. It was like he was mild. He should have been safe. I think it was one time he was supposed to score a run. He didn't. He was almost walking. I mean, this is embarrassing.
No, I understand. It's it was tough to watch for them. Trying to think what their bright spots were. I mean, you get the perfect game in there, but it really just they just never clicked.
I think he had 7 starts out of those 8. Other than that run, it was horrific. I mean, Cole might win the Cy Young. That's probably look at Garrett Cole probably wins the Cy Young. DJ LeMahieu had a better second half. I guess Gleyber Torres, it was better in the second half. I mean, it was. Again, I mean, I guess those are some things you look forward to. Judge, you mentioned, hit 35-plus home runs and missed basically a third of the season. I mean, there's positives there, but, you mentioned Boone, you mentioned Cashman, and Yankee fans, understandably so, are very frustrated to the fact that they are going to come back more than likely. I mean, because the Yankees don't make changes. I mean, Brian Cashman must have something on the Steinbrenner family. This is what I would just say objectively, John. He must have something on the Steinbrenner
Well, what he has is, in all honesty, 5 championships, or he was around for 5 championships.
True.
They make a ton of money every year. He'll spend money. Now, it's not what George Steinbrenner used to spend, but that's fine. I think he'd be a great general manager anywhere else. I think the biggest issue, and you've seen it with other teams in this town, is eventually your voice is just muted out. For instance, Tom Coughlin was a great football coach, but after 10 years, it's 10 years. Cashman's been around forever. So it's like yes, he's fantastic, and he'll forget more baseball than I'll ever
It was
know.
like that with Joe Torre. Listen, Joe Torre was getting toward the end of his run. It was kind of like, okay, yeah, they've been to the playoffs, but they hadn't won a World Series recently. Even Joe Girardi's last year with the Yankees, they go to the American League
Well,
Championship.
Girardi shouldn't have been fired. That was the
Right.
issue, you know.
Right.
And I think that's the inflection point with this franchise. And I don't want to pin everything on Boone, but Girardi got him with the baby Bombers, right, to Game 7. They're almost in the World Series, and if they get to the World Series, Girardi might still be the manager. I don't know.
Oh, absolutely. To probably make that case. I mean, look, and he had a great run as Yankees manager. I mean, he was 10 years, and he had got them a winning season every year. They were in the playoffs, I think, 7 times, and he successfully rebuilt that team on the fly. They were right there in the American League Championship. That's the closest that the Yankees have come to a World Series since 2009, and they let him go. And then,
Right.
Aaron Boone, look. I mean, the point's going to be, well, he had the most successful 6 years of any manager to start his career. And this year, maybe not his fault, but sometimes you have to make a change. Like you said, listen, Coughlin won 2 Super Bowls with the Giants, but it was getting toward the end of that run. It was like the Giants, it's like you have to make a move. Look, even the Jets went through with Rex Ryan. Rex Ryan, the first 2 years, went to the AFC Championship game, but it was kind of like, getting toward year 5, getting toward year 6 of that end of that run. It's like, well, you kind of leveled off, and I think, unfortunately, it happens. I mean, the Mets had it with Bobby Valentine those years. Listen, you got to take him to the World Series, but, unfortunately, sometimes you have to make a change, and I just don't know if the Yankees do that. But with the Mets, I do agree with you that there are positives. Lindor, again, despite everything that people say about Lindor had 31 and 98. Alonso, I'll get to in a second, 46-plus home runs. Francisco Alvarez from a catcher. The Mets don't have too many power-hitting catchers, as you know, John. Despite, some of his struggles, still had 25 home runs. I mean, there are some things. We got to see Mark Vientos a little bit. Showed you some flashes the last few weeks. I mean, I think that's a good thing. I mean, Jeff McNeil was a little better in the second half. I guess it'll be a very interesting year to see what happens with Jeff McNeil. But, I mean, what do the Mets do then with Pete Alonso? Because that was one of my positives. But, obviously, he's going to be a free agent real soon, John.
You try and sign him. Why would you not have him on your team? This guy is going to shatter every franchise record. He's hit more than 40 home runs every season he's been in the big leagues.
Yep.
You can build a team around him. Everyone says he's a great clubhouse guy. What's not to love? What scares me is when you give him a big contract, you have to pay him more than Lindor. Lindor probably sees himself as the leader in the clubhouse, and then can those two coexist? And you don't necessarily have to coexist. Barry Bonds and Jeff Kent shared a locker room forever, but it's how you build the other pieces around them. So I would sign Alonso today. But David Stearns isn't doing his job if he's not going out there trying to find whatever suitable trade piece there is.
Yeah, but you know what? You said something interesting, which is exactly what I think, and we've talked about this on the Sportswire shows, is the Mets have never really had that, like, thumper. Yes, we had Piazza. Yes, we had Beltran for a few years, Delgado. Sure, I mean, Todd Hundley for 1 year. I guess if you go back in the memory,
they've never had a homegrown thumper.
Like that was going to be my next point. If you think about Met history, we either had to buy the person or we had to get him through a trade. This is a guy that we brought up. This is a guy that already has the franchise records. You think about 40-plus home runs. Only a few people had done it. This guy's already done it just as many times, and he shattered it. I mean, this is somebody that we should have till the minute he can't play baseball anymore. I mean, that's really what this comes down to. I mean, they would be foolish, to let him go. Or even, I don't even think I would want to trade him because, again, this is a guy, John, you hit the nail on the head. He's already hit 50-plus home runs. Never did that before. 40-plus home runs. Did that multiple times. I mean, everything that he's done and what he brings to the team, a power-hitting first baseman, we just never had that. We really haven't had that much in the team's history. Sure, we had Keith, Delgado for a couple years. Okay, fine. But we never had that for like 7 to 8, 9 year period. That power hitting first baseman. We got him.
Right. And he's not Keith Hernandez, but his glove has gotten better. He's not a liability at first base. So that helps out a ton. Yeah, I don't get it. I mean, the only way you trade him is if you're getting a better return or can't miss prospects. So for instance, if a team has another Ronald Acuna, who is going to be, or Fernando Tatis Jr., but even then I would be hesitant to do that. The only person I trade him for is Mike Trout, which apparently the Mets and their farm system have a great, they're
Mike
very
Trout's
well
been hurt
regarded.
though, like every year the last 4 years. I mean, yeah, I would kind of agree with you, and he's also from Philadelphia, but he's always injured. Mike Trout
No,
now.
listen, and this trade isn't going to happen, but like if you're giving up, hear me out, for
All
Mike
right.
Trout, if you're giving up Brett Beatty, Vientos, Acuna, I would have a little pause giving up Alvarez. But like if it's those
Yeah,
first
I agree
three
with you
before
on
Alvarez, why wouldn't you entertain that?
No, I think
Anaheim
it's a
wants
fair
to get him
point.
off the books.
No, I think it's a fair point. I mean, I see where you're going with that. I mean, you would have to entertain it. I mean, Beatty, I didn't really like what I saw from Beatty at times here this year. Vientos, I did like a little bit. I think he showed you something. Alvarez, again, another position the Mets just historically do not have power hitting from the catching position. Again, we had Piazza we spoke about, but really very few times being Gary Carter, but that's really a bit. Hundley had 2 years maybe at most, and we really haven't had. LaDuca was an all-star, sure, but LaDuca wasn't really a power hitter, even with
Right.
with some of the things he was trying to, when he was on, still wasn't a power hitter. But so I hear where you're coming from, but I think to me, the New York Mets, he's a New York Met. This is not Pete Alonso playing for the Pittsburgh Pirates, the Kansas City Royals, the Oakland/Las Vegas Athletics. He should be here in this market. He should be here as a New York Met. That's what I would hope for. I mean, that's always going to be the topic of the offseason, in addition to a manager. So who do you think would be the type of manager that the Mets would bring in?
Well, David Stearns, he wasn't going to say it in his press conference because you can't, but I think Craig Counsell's at the top of the list. That's who he would probably bring in.
Milwaukee had a phenomenal run there, absolutely.
But someone who he should be giving a phone call to right now is Bob Melvin over at San Diego. It was a fantastic Athletic article a few years ago.
I heard that their team's like about to implode, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, right, but there was not a few years ago, a few months ago or even weeks ago. I don't know. Time is all relevant. But anyway, it's like the worst kept secret that he and the general manager don't get along. So if that's the case and he wants to go, then why not? You've already seen connections of him going to San Francisco because of Farhan Zaidi. Those two were together in Oakland. Yeah. I think Melvin or Counsell are two great guys because they've managed in small markets. They know that
Milwaukee's become a model. Milwaukee, the last like 7 or 8 years, has become like a really, really stable franchise for a franchise that I don't really think won that much before Counsell. I mean, okay, they had a couple years here and there, maybe Ned Yost, but other than that, this is a model franchise now.
No, I agree. I think I think the Milwaukee model is a good way to go because that's where everyone's trying to go, and the Mets have to adapt. So if you've been watching Tampa Bay, you've been watching Milwaukee, like, get used to the Mets having an opener and on a consistent basis. Get used to kind of, you saw it with Buck, but Edwin Diaz pitching in the 8th inning. And it'll be great to have Edwin Diaz for a full season and a manager and a full team that would know how to use him. This is going to be a collaborative effort. David Stearns is going to have a huge impact on the lineup, the construction of the ball club. I mean, as you should, is he the chief baseball officer? I don't know the exact title. Head of baseball operations, president.
Yeah, I think president and head of baseball operations, if I'm not mistaken.
Those would be my two. He won the press conference today because he announced that he's not going to. He expects Pete Alonso to be the opening day first baseman. It's going to be a collaborative effort, and that he doesn't know who his manager is yet, which I don't buy for a second. He's going to do everything he can to try and get Craig Counsell. If not, you got to pivot to Bob Melvin.
Well, he knows him from Milwaukee, obviously, and certainly that's obviously where you go. I mean, certainly Gabe Kapler's out there. I don't know if I'd want.
No. I wouldn't touch Gabe Kapler with a 10-foot pole. He's never won anything. He had one fluke year in San Francisco. And here's the other thing too: you got to have an experienced manager. I don't want the next Davey Martinez and I know he won a World Series, but I don't want Joe Espada or I'm trying to think who else, Jeremy Hefner, Carlos Beltran. Like, get an experienced guy out there.
And you don't want Joe Girardi managing the New York Mets.
I wanted him in 2019.
I remember that. Everybody.
I really did. It's what we learned about his time in Philadelphia was that he wasn't really as collaborative, and I think that was a big reason why Cashman let him go. He didn't want to be fought with the lineup.
Philadelphia changed managers, and they're in the playoffs the last 2 years, and last year go to the World Series almost in a way. It kind of not that it put a black mark on his record, but you looked at it and said, well, you know what? Okay, he had a Phillies team that was basically built to win, and he
Right.
struggled to get be a 500 manager there.
And that's what gives me a little bit of pause on Girardi. I don't think I'd be upset if they hired him because he's still an experienced manager. He's managed
Won a
in
World
New York.
Series, yep.
I if Joe Girardi's a manager and they went after Counsell and Melvin, then I could live with that. That's
Melvin,
fine.
I think, would be okay. I think there's a fair point to be made that it wasn't Melvin's fault there in San Diego. They got hot at the end.
Well, he won a ton in Oakland with nobody.
Nothing, yeah.
Yeah. And he would
won in
win every other
Seattle,
year.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he's been a good manager. And, I think obviously that team was like, a chaotic clubhouse from what I read. There was an article out there basically talking about that clubhouse. And, he was able to at least parcel it together there to be very competitive. That Melvin, if he doesn't come back and isn't retained, because obviously if you are going to change general managers, you are changing the manager. That makes sense there in San Diego. Girardi's, everyone's going to talk about Girardi just because of New York and that, but I kind of agree with you. The Philadelphia run kind of leaves me a little bit of a lacking appetite. I don't think Terry Francona is going to come out of retirement to manage the New York Mets. That would obviously be one I'd have to give you as an asterisk, but I think after what I've read about Terry Francona in the last week or so, John, I don't think that he's going to manage again. People throw out there Ron Washington occasionally, but I think he's kind of out of the game for a while as a manager. So I kind of agree with you. Craig Counsell would be the dream pick. I'm not sure, though. That would have to depend on Milwaukee in terms of everything else. But I guess, we'll have to see. But the Mets yet again have some interesting decisions, John Perez.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a fun offseason. I want to see where they land in the Ohtani sweepstakes because that's going to tell us everything of if they're going to be all in again or if they're punting on Ohtani and going after these big-time free agents.
Does the injury make you say, you know what, maybe they punt? He had a couple of late injuries and make you say punt on him a little bit at all, or no?
Would you punt on a guy that hits 40 and 100 every year?
No, because the New York Mets haven't had it. So my answer would be no, but baseball
are we forgetting that he's the best hitter in baseball too?
Oh, and what he does is a two-way player. We'll never see again. So
he's not going to get $60 million, but I'll take someone who is a fantastic hitter like him. Why not?
No,
you sandwich him in between Alonso and Lindor?
Absolutely. No, listen, I think that, and I think he would sell tickets on his own with obviously the market here in New York and certainly, with his following. I agree with you. I definitely think I would do it and some, but, it's obviously up to Mr. Cohn, everybody else he's putting there. But I got to ask you real quick before I do ask you for fun, a few thoughts on the CUNY and a few other thoughts on varsity media. I have to ask you them. So what do you think here in the playoffs? Obviously, we see some new teams in the postseason for the first time in a while. The Miami Marlins are in the playoffs. Leave aside COVID for the first time since 2003. Obviously, the Baltimore Orioles are back. What a job. Speaking about teams we want to model off for the Mets, the Baltimore Orioles have their best regular season since 1980. The guys and myself were speaking about that last week and the following week. Houston kind of finds a way. They find a way to win the American League West. Atlanta and the Dodgers, we pretty much expected to be there. But, obviously Tampa Bay is in it once again. They always kind of find ways, though, to not really win the big one. And you got the Minnesota Twins, who I kind of found fascinating because they haven't won a playoff game in 20 years. And they walked through a very weak American League Central. But leave all that aside, John. Anything, any stories or any team you're rooting for here in the playoffs?
I am curious to see how Baltimore develops, and that could shape the AL East for years to come. From the simple fact of now the Yankees have to deal with not just the division champion Orioles, the Rays are always good. Blue Jays have a good young core. Who knows what's happening in Boston? So, yeah, it'd be fun to see Baltimore get as far as they can. I think – see, I want to root for the Dodgers. I really do because I like to see because I remember those 90s Braves and they only won one.
Yeah.
The Dodgers, they have to win. You have to win more than just one.
Was it 10 years consecutively that the Dodgers have at least been in the postseason, right? So it's 10 years, and you've got, one World Series championship and 3 appearances? So,
right.
Yeah, that's kind of a good comp to the Braves. The Braves had what 14 division titles, and they had one World Series, and they had what 5 World Series appearances, or something, like
Right.
4 or 5 World Series. Yeah, it was 5, 91, 92, 95, 96, 99. So they had 5 World Series appearances and only had the one championship. I mean, yeah, it's a good comp. The Dodgers only have the one championship so far.
Also, I've just been to Dodger Stadium. It's my favorite stadium.
I've
so
seen
it's
that before. You posted it on social media.
No,
One of my other buddies actually went there. Joey Roses, one of my first ever guests on Sportswire, actually he raves about Dodger Stadium. So
no, it's great. It stinks as a Met fan that the Braves, you have to start to hate them now. Because I really liked them when they were younger, and I was like, oh, this is cute. Ronald Acuna and Ozzie Albies, and now they're the best players in baseball, and it's not fun. And then they replaced Freddie Freeman with a fantastic first baseman as well. Like it's going to happen again.
They might have actually upgraded with him. And by the way, Freeman had 59 doubles this year, most doubles of any player I think since Todd Helton in 2000. And Riley himself, I think, hit 50 plus home runs. And I think hit the franchise record for home runs, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, just crazy stats. The Braves, they just find, John, and that's what we've lacked as Mets fans and watching this team. We've never had that stability. You talked about the 90s, and the Braves always had stability. Sherholtz, Bobby Cox, but even when they couldn't afford guys after a while, Greg Maddux leaves them, they still find ways to win. Tom Glavine obviously leaves and goes to us, and they still found ways to retool. All the players that the Braves kind of had interchangeable. Fred McGriff in the 90s, Ryan Klesko, they found ways to replace them. Andrew Jones leaves. They replace him. And, even, later years, the Atlanta Braves now, which I thought was such a crazy stat, they have actually won the most divisional championships since divisional play going back to 1960. No, it's not the Yankees, not the Cardinals, not the Dodgers. It just shows you that the Braves really the last, 30 plus years, they just win. I mean, they've won, I think, 22 division titles in the last 32 years. So it's basically, they're almost a lock to make the playoffs. They're in the playoffs more than the Yankees.
Yeah, and they're not going to slow down at all.
No.
Anytime soon, which...
And they did this with pitching injuries. They did this with their pitching staff not as good as it should have been.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting, too, because, it's been the opposite of the 90s Braves, right? They don't have 3 starters like Glavine, Smoltz, and Maddux.
And even then, they had Denny Nagel, Kevin Millwood. I mean, they had Don Avery at the beginning of it. The Braves were always like, they were solid. Their starting rotation was like, okay, if I get through Maddux, I got to get through Glavine, I got to get through Smoltz, I got to get through Denny Nagel, got to get through Kevin Millwood, John Avery at the beginning of it. It was like, you had Steve Avery. You had to get through all these different guys, and yet conversely, this time they outslug you to death. Right.
Yeah, no, it hasn't been fun to watch. No lead is safe, and I'm glad that teams are, that the Mets aren't playing them 19 times a year anymore. So that's good.
All right, it's a small consolation. Obviously, we'll have to see. Marlins are in the playoffs. I'm kind of rooting to see what they do. Obviously, we'll also see what happens with the Dodgers, as you pointed out. The Diamondbacks are back in the playoffs for the first time since 2017. There is some interesting storylines. Will the Twins actually win a playoff game? Maybe because the Yankees aren't. Maybe they will. I was watching a little bit of them the last week of the season. Texas, who really should have won the American League West, kind of collapsed here, and they make the playoffs. Toronto, I think Toronto's another team with a lot of pressure because this core that they've had hasn't won a playoff game, whereas the Orioles, they just fast-tracked everybody, win the division, and some in Toronto. I think there's a lot of pressure on them. We'll see what happens with that. Tampa Bay is back in it. We'll talk about all that here. But I got to ask you before I get to a few closing thoughts here. Because I just had on Anthony McLean. I won't pain you with memories of 2020 and in the Cuniac semifinals, but anything? Are you covering basketball this year? I think you are. You were talking about it, but the CUNY, it wasn't one of the more memorable years. Don't say anything if you don't want to, but it wasn't one of the more memorable years that I watched. In fact, I covered more of the Skyline Conference this past year because the CUNY play it was to be desirable, but I do know that Jamel Gist, my old friend Jamel Gist, is going to be now at Hunter, and there's been some changes throughout the conference in different ways. And anything of note that strikes you, when it comes to the CUNY Act this year? I guess we won't see those crazy Hunter 128, 125 games as everybody else this year, but anything of note that you're watching?
As a broadcaster, I'm happy we're not seeing the Hunter games just because.
Oh my God, those games, John. Those games.
The line changes, yeah.
They were worse than last year's baseball games in terms of how long they would go.
Yeah, no, You know what? I'll tell you what, though. Once you memorize the players, it's a lot of fun. And from a prep standpoint, they're only on for a minute and a half. You really can't weave in any stories on them. And then what was amazing about Hunter was they got everyone else to play at their pace, but they never won the amount of games to be a title contender.
Yeah, they never. I mean, they would make the playoffs. They beat John Jay in the playoff game. They'd win a playoff game usually, but they never, like you said, never felt these years with Pellin that they were like Baruch. Never felt they were Lehman here lately. I felt I even thought York was better than the last 2 years. Certainly not John Jay when John Jay was great, or Brooklyn when Brooklyn was, certainly won the CUNY. I never felt, like you said, I never felt they were a threat.
Right. No, I think, and at least on the men's side, it's probably Baruch and Lehman's year. I haven't delved into the rosters, but
Baruch is always good. Baruch is always going to be, always going to be up there. I'd throw maybe CCNY as a bonus because I think you have Yassine Saki for one more year. I would think CCNY. I mean, certainly York, which had a good team, loses some guys, obviously with Coach Gist going to Hunter. I think that'll be interesting to see. I think John Jay is kind of now in this weird rebuilding period. I almost feel like it was Coach Highland's moment in 2020 to win that championship. He had that team, and I think he would have came back if it wasn't for COVID. You had Kyle LaGuardia one more year. But, I almost feel like now it's like you're starting from the drawing board almost.
Feels like they're always starting from the drawing board.
And yes, I know that was 2020 was your team. You were basically had everything. You had all the chips. You had the 3 best players in the CUNY. You had basically, that was the moment, and then it didn't happen. It slipped, and then I think you would have probably came back in 21 because I said LaGuardia had one more year of eligibility. He would have probably stepped in. He would have filled a little bit of the void from Brower and Doug, but, now it's almost like you had some injuries last year with some different guys. And you lose.
I think John Jay's biggest issue, and they've only had one player like this ever since Highland's been the coach, was Jason Brower. Just came in, was an instant winner, and elevated everyone else.
And he's still playing pro ball, by the way, Jason Brower.
Right. They've never had another player that wanted to take the ball in the final possession.
Yep.
And I don't know who that guy is.
I guess forward. Rivera might have. Angel Rivera at times 2 years ago became that player. At times, I felt like Angel Rivera was becoming that player. I mean, Garrison Watkins I never said that he was that guy. Dan Kenny should have been a guy that should have been more of that kind of.
And then the other thing too is that in a college landscape where you're getting transfers left and right, that hasn't translated down to the Division III level.
No.
And on top of that, you have to have criminal justice students at John Jay, whereas Baruch, Hunter, CCNY, Brooklyn, they can pluck these kids away from anywhere else. Yep. And I know that it's not for a lack of trying, but Highland's never had the opportunity to retool instead of, so he's always had to rebuild. And that's why you're having these 4-year intervals. And, he knows the pressure. They haven't won the big one. And 2019, 2020 was their best shot. And they haven't been there since.
No, I think it's obviously going to be, we'll certainly see. Obviously, I think Belern Lada was also something that hurt the team. He got injured, and then obviously he struggled to come into the rotation. I think that was something else. There was a lot of things there, obviously, but yeah, I think just in 2020, that was the team. They were an all-star team. The school, the program, it should have been there, and unfortunately, different things happened. I still think they would have came back in 2021, and they would have been right there just because you would have had LaGuardia, you would have had Watkins, you would have had Dan Kenny, Angel Rivera another year, but obviously that's how it goes. Alas, we'll see with certain guys. Maybe Joel Lane kind of comes up and gives them something. We'll see about some of these other guys if they can step into the rotation. I'll be obviously watching it. We'll talk about it. Maybe you'll be on the call for some of these things. But, I want to come back to Varsity Media here is before we get into closing thoughts here. And, for somebody that hasn't heard about Varsity Media, why should they check it out?
Check us out because there's nobody else that's covering high school sports the way that we are. Coming with experienced announcers, number one, graphics, instant replay, multiple camera angles, and a following of 50,000 followers across our social media channels. So if Tom Bryce makes a fantastic 75-yard touchdown catch and run, that'll be on social media. So the rest of the Bryce family, the high school community, they can all watch. We're the home to the private and public school playoffs across multiple sports. The first big sport being football coming up in November. And it's just a lot of fun. We've got some fun segments in there. The announcers are, the broadcasts are a lot of fun. We're having a great time. We've got some really good talent, and you never know where these kids are going to be in 2 or 3 years. They could be in the NFL, the NBA, even the PLL and lacrosse. And this is where you can see them when they're young.
Thing. Look, professional sports with lacrosse, I mean, it's become it's exploded. I remember having a conversation with somebody. I was in a coffee shop on Staten Island. This had to have been maybe 5 years ago. And the owner of the coffee shop, we were speaking, and I said, blah, blah, blah. And he was talking about his son and how he was on his way to becoming a big time lacrosse player. And his goal was actually to be a professional lacrosse player. And I was like, what? Wait a minute. Everybody said, I want to be a professional basketball player. I want to be a football player. I want to be, you can obviously do soccer because you can play in Europe and elsewhere. But I mean, lacrosse is a great point that you made, that you can watch a lot of this stuff. And lacrosse is a fun game to watch. I actually happen to enjoy watching lacrosse. I think that's all reasons why people should check out Varsity Media and all these different platforms here, especially on Varsity Media on X. YouTube is where you can watch all this stuff, and almost 30,000 subscribers are on YouTube, and you can watch these shows and these games for free, and you can see John's, of course, beautiful face. You can see his mugshot, see his great co-host that he's got with him calling these games. I mean, you can do all that. And also, if you want to find out more information on Varsity Media, varsitymedia.net. And you guys are even in Rochester. I mean, do you even plan, or people going up to Rochester to call these games up there? And that's a interesting area up there in the southern tier.
My supervisor is. I haven't gotten that call yet. I'll take the ride if he wants to. I know he'll probably listen to this, but yeah, I mean, hey, I'll call a game anywhere. I don't mind.
That's a fun environment up there, because I know there was before she moved on, she does work now with the I think it's in Wisconsin. There was a girl, Nicole Menner, I interviewed, and she was up there in Binghamton and Rochester, and that's you want to talk about high school football for a second, going up there, John. I mean, you guys are covering that. Yeah. I think that's going to be another place where people, if you're a fan up there in the southern tier or up there in upstate, especially if you're in places like Syracuse, Binghamton, Rochester, Sullivan County, all those places up there, upstate, that's going to be a really, really fun environment, because high school football there and basketball, as we're getting into it, boy, I am getting fired up here thinking about Varsity Media, and I can't wait to see what the future. That John is always kicking butt on different things, and we spoke pretty much about everything here. And you'll see John also here come up. He does some stuff with John Jay, still volleyball. We'll see him here on the volleyball teams. Also, John Jay's always got a great athletics program. This women's soccer team, everybody always talks about the women's soccer team. So we'll see what the future of that is. You can follow the program at JJ Athletics on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. John, I could talk to you all day, but I'm sure you're getting ready for notes on the game. Maybe you're going to do a Hard Knocks-like segment for Varsity Media soon. I don't give a little cheap pop there, but obviously I could talk with you all day. But I know you're a busy man. I definitely want to have you back on maybe in a couple of months, maybe after the season here, high school sports, at least with football, maybe in the middle of basketball. I'll see if I could get a thought or two from the brute force on that. So maybe now that I know that you're doing high school basketball, I actually might want to have you back, because I know you'll be calling some of these games. And I hope I maybe can get you when you're calling a Plainview JFK game, so I can get a funny story from you about Brad Weiss or something like that. And obviously, but in the meantime, I want to give you the floor, give you some closing thoughts. Anything else you want to plug, share, or say, John? And I can't thank you enough, my friend. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks for having me. No, you hit it all. You always do a fantastic job. A big part of my COVID experience was watching you guys on the Friday nights, and then just
I remember you coming
tagging in on Facebook, and I would just throw these absurd things out there.
Yes, you did. Unfortunately, I'm locked out of Facebook on my laptop. It's like the strangest thing. So we've been building YouTube. I just can't get on Facebook anymore. It's like the strangest thing. We even tried. I think Brad tried to get on his page. Somebody else was like, well, I'll log you in. And they still couldn't do it. But yes, the Friday nights, I still get messages from people, and they say, I just want to say, you got me through the day, you got me through with COVID, and it's
it was crazy. Fun because it was late at night. My wife works early mornings, like 3:00 before the farmers get up. So I was up.
I'm a newspaper carrier. I know all about that, John.
Right. Yeah. So I just remember throwing out these outrageous things. I think the Rangers won their first round series, and then I immediately went on and I was like, so the Rangers are going to win the I said, first time, long time, the Rangers are going to win the cup, something like that. And just to see all your faces was really funny.
Well,
Since
especially
you're
mine,
reading
because I'm
it.
an Islanders fan. So when you said that, it was like, well, I mean, I was trying to bite my teeth, but no, that was funny, John. I'll give you
Yeah,
that.
no, I would just throw out these obscure things. I would say like, should the
I hope
Mets?
you do that if you're calling a Plainview game. See, I really hope that you get a Plainview JFK game this year, and you can see the brute force Bradley Weiss, who I know remembers you very well because you called the games at John Jay, and St. Joe's and John Jay had a rivalry, and they're going to play each other this year. But the fact that you're calling a game for Plainview JFK, I'm hoping, and you see Brad Weiss, you see that tall, lanky Brad Weiss with those glasses on, you see him there, and I hope you say something funny or something off the key, and maybe it'll rattle him a little bit on the court. Maybe you'll start thinking about it. He'll get animated. He'll get brute. So that's really my prayer. My hope, John Perez, this year for basketball is you call a Plainview JFK game.
Yeah. Hey, listen, our doors are open. If Plainview JFK wants us to do a game, we'll certainly listen
I'm
and
going to
give you a
make
little
sure that
rundown.
they hear about this one. I'm going to make sure of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, no, it's been a lot of fun. It's always great chatting with you. It feels, whenever I talk to you, I know that the sports season is just beginning and it's a great feeling. And I
Yes.
love the fall. It's the best time of year.
Me too. John, I was so happy that I got you. And I know we are going to do this a few weeks earlier, but I'm like, you know what? I'm just getting back into college basketball. I just had on Anthony McLean. Like I said, I won't bring up those Brooklyn John Jay memories, but
I'm
like,
over it. I was upset that was the first time ever calling games where I was genuinely upset after a game.
Yeah, I know a lot of people.
And I got over it in 48 hours. I was like, all right, well, whatever.
Well, you always have something to do, but really, a lot of people felt like it was like a moment that people really were expecting, like John Jay to win it, and then Brooklyn came in there the way they did as underdogs. And again, I'm not going to go into the semantics. Levy was hurt that day, and he really shouldn't have played. And there were other things I don't want to get into at the refereeing, but the fact is they went in there. Listen, all those guys, Tesserero came back, Noah Shai, obviously Anthony McLean was the CUNY MVP, and they went in there. You got to give them a lot of credit, but the point is at this time of year, I'm getting excited because actually Brad and I were speaking about this. The schedules just came out in college basketball at our level.
Right.
So we were actually going over the games and we were talking, well, York and St. Joe's play John Jay on the 29th in St. Joe's. So I'm getting excited. So this is a great time of the year. I usually get a little bit depressed because, now it's getting darker earlier and, my pool just closed. Well, it rained so much. It should have closed probably earlier than that. But, now I'm getting excited again because I'm thinking about St. Joe's. I'm thinking about John Jay. I'm thinking about York. I'm thinking about Coach Gist at Hunter. I'm thinking about our friends at Five Towns College. We watch their games. My buddy Corey Jakes, local guy. I mean, so I'm thinking about all that again. That's why I'm like, you know what? I got to have John on right now because college basketball season is 5 weeks from now. So this was a great segue to bring you on.
Yeah, man. No, I'm excited. It's going to be a lot of fun. And listen, whenever just put the bat signal out there if you want me to come on.
I think now because you're doing high school sports, I think that's going to definitely be the case. I am going to certainly pray like there is no tomorrow. And I always pray because I am a reverend, but I am going to pray you get Plainview JFK this year. I am going to pray. I am going to do everything I humanly can to pray that you get Plainview JFK this year because I know it's going to certainly rattle. It's going to rattle and hum like U2's famous album for the brute force Brad Weiss. So I'm going to hope. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed. But in the meantime, you can follow John on all of his social medias. Also, Varsity Media, one more time. We'll put them out there. Make sure you support them. I'm really excited about the future of them. And I'm going to be watching some of these games very, very soon. John, thank you as always. Keep up the great work. And I look forward to speaking with you very soon.
Thanks, Tom. You're the best.
All right, that was Mr. John Perez. He is the man behind all the great stuff you see at Varsity Media, and you're going to see him here all throughout the high school sports season here, probably between now and I'd say about the month of March, and you'll also see him from time to time in great places like John Jay College, our old alma mater, and John does some stuff there, different sports, so maybe we'll see him back on campus this year. But in the meantime, my name is the Reverend Tom Bryce, the man behind Sportswire Radio, and we'll be back here with more coverage later this week, so stay tuned. But until then, good night, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are, on the number one global radio station that is Sportswire Radio.